Congress generally do huge events at the major city in their district. We try to do events all across the district and go to townships, small communities, as well as Jackson and Monroe, some of the larger communities as well. And trying to give an opportunity for people in those localities to have a chance to meet with their member of Congress. As far as I know, that's the design that our framers and founders had for our system of government, especially with the People's House representative who represents the district and not the state. And while I love Michigan, and I'll fight for Michigan, yet it's the 7th district that means the most to me, because that's really who I represent. So we're glad to be back here in Dexter today and doing this town hall. If you've been keeping up, as I assume you have been, with what's going on in the life and times of Washington, D.C. right now, it's an interesting place. And I go back shortly after this, head over to the metro and get on a plane and fly back to D.C., not knowing absolutely for certain what this week will portend. But if it was like last week, it was an amazing week, where we ended up voting on only two pieces of legislation, that being H.R. 1, that we finished up on Friday, which was the alleged election reform bill. We can talk about that if you'd like, and we can also talk about the other one. I believe it was H.R. 8, which was a bill that, or a resolution, it was supposed to take issue with some comments made, anti-Semitic comments made by Representative Omar, continuing anti-Semitic comments being made that questioned patriotism of members of Congress who supported Israel, which is the majority of us, Democrat and Republican. And it was interesting to watch what went on last week as they tried somehow to decide who was Speaker of the House for the week. And ultimately, at the end of the week, on Thursday afternoon, finally a vote was taken that was just a nebulous resolution against being anti about anything. And it's hard to vote against something like that, because I'm not anti-Semitic, I'm not racist, I'm not anti-Islam. I'm a pretty positive guy on some of those things, because America opens the opportunity for freedom in this country. We are a pluralistic country in everything, including our religion and all of the rest. So those were the two bills, and those disrupted almost every action last week. And so we'll see what happens this week. There's a quote as we start this new round of town halls. It was a quote given by a famous world leader who said, "America is like a healthy body, and its resistance is threefold." Note what he said. It's patriotism, it's morality, it's spiritual life. Went on to say, if we can undermine these three areas, America will collapse from within. That's a pretty scary thought. I mean, the greatness of America, and we sit here in a veterans service club facility that is special because of the impact of what our military has done in preserving, first claiming our freedoms, and then handing it off to members of the citizenry to develop a totally unique, never been tried before system of government for America that had never been tried ever in any place in the world. A great experiment in democracy under a constitution. It's called the Republic. And lo and behold, it worked. And really, relatively speaking, in the history of the world, a short history for this great country, we've come to lead the world in almost every area. as long as we can remember. And that's a pretty neat concept, and it was based upon those three specific things: patriotism, morality, and our spirituality.
Who's that quote from?
That's a quote of a world leader. Let me ask, who do you think it's from?
I've heard you repeat it before.
Who do you think it's from?
You attributed it to Joseph Stalin?
Joseph Stalin. Isn't that something? He caught it. He caught the uniqueness of the strength of America. And if you can undermine that, America would collapse from within. So when I go back to Washington and I see what's going on right now, and I see a majority that's struggling to keep unity amongst themselves in the House, who debate the ideas even of what Americanism is all about, it ignites me more to be involved in promoting the greatness of America. Last week, and I state this, then we'll go to the questions, and the judge is still trying to put them all together. Thank you so much, Judge Fink, for your willingness to do this. Came out last week, unbeknownst to me, and I say this because I think it's special for this district that I represent. We've done significant amount of work to keep promises that we made that I believe are promises that are based upon what this country is all about. It's conservatism, its unique place of a governmental system run by the people under a constitution. It works. So that's been my premise. And so in the past, it's been recorded that I'm the most conservative member, lifetime rating for our Michigan delegation. And I wear that proudly. I've never denied that I'm a conservative. And that's what elections are all about, to elect who you want to represent, and I appreciate the privilege of representing the 7th District. But then the question comes, can you do it effectively in a district like this? That is a swing district, and has swung both ways in our recent history. Last week it came out from a nonpartisan organization that I was rated as the most effective legislator in the Michigan Republican delegation. 30th most effective out of 244 Republicans in Congress. Now that's pretty unique, especially when you look on the Democrat side, who was rated the most effective Democrat of our Michigan delegation. That was Debbie Dingell. If you've watched our records, we work together quite often. On the issues that we can agree on, we work together, we've sponsored bills together, we've had bills signed into law together. On those things, whether it's the Great Lakes issues, whether it's opioid heroin abuse, whether it's veterans issues, we've done town halls together. And so I think it's pretty cool. The 2 districts, I tell Debbie I hug her on 3 sides, with my district surrounding her on 3 sides, and working together, so when we can achieve things together in a bipartisan fashion, we do it. And so ranking 30th out of 244, and her ranking 89th out of 204, puts us both in the top 100 most effective legislators in Congress. I want to keep that going. The effective rating was based upon legislative advancements, committee assignments, and those type of things. And both of us serve on what we would tell you, and I think is true, the most powerful committee in the House, that's Energy and Commerce, affecting almost everything that goes on here in this great 7th District and in her 11th District. So for that reason, we want to keep representing according to commitments we've made and with the general needs of each of our districts. And so again, that's why we do these town halls, and based upon those, I think, Karl, why don't we go to the questions?
First of all, I want to see if this is about right for the volume. That seems to be all right? And several of you have asked, what am I doing up here with these cards? I was attempting unsuccessfully to try to kind of group the questions into particular areas, and I'll continue to do that. But that's what I was doing, and there are a lot of questions, and some of you have submitted 3 or 4, and probably what I'll do when I get to one of those, I'll put the others aside for a while. We'll see how we do with the time. But I'm not trying to keep anything out, except I was looking for an easy question for me to read, maybe something more. These are all going to be more difficult for you to deal with, I think. So once I read this, I'll be sitting down, and just because it'll be easier. The instructions were that I would read the first name and where the person lives, not the last name. So in this, I think this from Catherine, and lives in Dexter. Why must questions be submitted this way? Follow-up questions are not well addressed with this system.
Maybe, maybe not. We've done it from long years of experience of trying to make this hour, which is always a short hour, as efficient and as effective as possible, and allowing more people to ask their key questions than of just a few people that I know have follow-up issues, but many times that just drags on and on. And sometimes we've seen very clearly that becomes just really an opportunity for disagreement to continue on. And so we're doing our best to get the questions, and that's the reason we've done it. We've done it both ways, and there are some in smaller settings. There are some times when we won't even do the cards. But today, this is large enough that we want to get through as much as possible. If you've been on my tele-town halls, you've heard in the last 2 tele-town halls, I've taken a different approach as well. That we take the question, and then like on normal talk shows, we cut it off, answer the question, move on. I was averaging 12 questions and answers over the course of an hour on the phone, and now we've gotten up approaching 20. That makes a lot of people more happy, having sat on the line waiting and then not getting a chance to even ask a question. So we're doing our best to cover the time.
This question is from Diane and Chelsea, and it may be a statement, but we'll ask you for your response. In my opinion, the Republican Party is not pro-life, rather pro-birth. Once that baby is born, the Republican Party works hard to cut food, medical attention from that baby. They give even minimum quality of life. Also, the baby the parents couldn't afford wouldn't have been born in the first place if the Republicans didn't shut down women's health centers that provide birth control. Your comment on that, please.
Well, you might guess I disagree with it very firmly. As a Republican, I've strongly supported life after life. I served on a charter board of an adoption agency. I served on a board of a pregnancy care center that had a shepherding home as well for unwed mothers, and has a ministry to unwed fathers as well, and trying to disciple them to become men that take responsibility. I've supported legislation that provides social welfare assistance, including food assistance, to people truly in need. And I've also done, I think, what is a pro-life position as well, in supporting legislation that would encourage work-capable individuals to perform some hours of work at least for things like their food stamps. In America, we hurt people if we just allow people to receive care, but no responsibility with it. We've seen that with the burgeoning of the food stamp program under the last administration, tremendously increased. We saw that. Did that help people? No.
Yes.
And now we've seen, as a result of good policies, economic policies, the lowest unemployment rate in 50 years, a continued increase in wages for the middle class wage increases. We've seen that continue. An economy that's strong, with 7 million jobs still going lacking for people to fill them. And that's why I've spent a significant amount of time developing proposals for career and technical education to get people into a work situation that will secure them for life. So I see that as life. But I also stand in opposition, as you saw my efforts, and you saw the Senate's efforts to bring up a bill that simply said a child born alive after a botched abortion should get the same care in a hospital that any born alive infant receives. Overwhelming numbers in America support that same position. But we couldn't get the 8 Democrats in the Senate to allow that bill even be brought up for consideration. Only got 3. And in the House, we've been blocked in every case for about 4 weeks now and trying to get the same bill up, Ann Wagner's bill that I co-sponsored as well, the Born Alive bill. That simply says, if a baby lives after an abortion attempt, is born alive, we take care of that baby in the same way we would take care of any other baby. That's pro-life.
This is from Gina Gregory. I take it Washtenaw, maybe. Well, anyway, Gregory. What can be done to prevent tax increases, including the proposed, I'm sorry, let me start over again. This is from Gina, the Gregory mailing address. What can be done to prevent tax increases, including the proposed gas tax? What would be the most efficient ways to check that funds are being allocated properly? Example, taxes for schools, not working, not want to keep dumping money when not accounted for.
Well, the only way to deal with that is make sure you're in contact with your legislative branch, your legislator, at each level of government that is considering tax increases or revenue enhancements, whatever term they use today. The gas tax that's being talked of, that's at the state level, so you need to talk with Donald Lazinski, for instance, and discuss what her position is on it. Any tax at the federal level that we're looking at, whether it's a tax in the New Green Deal or whatever, please keep in contact with me. At the local level, school boards are the people to talk to for any type of tax increases that go toward education, or certainly your county commissioners or your local township or village officials. Again, the price of liberty is eternal vigilance, was once said. I think that's true. It's your liberty that's in question in your mind, so make sure that you keep in contact directly. You certainly, by evidence of being here today, are some of the minority, sadly, that really take an active involvement in their governmental system. You go to the school board and you'll see another set of people. You go to a county commission, you'll see another set of people, but basically dealing with the issue at hand of that meeting. But that's an important thing to do.
This is from Sally, also with a Gregory address. What do you think should be done about PFAS contamination of our water supply?
We got to clean it up. And that's another issue that Debbie Dingle and I, as well as Dale Kildee, are working on. Continue calling for the appropriate agencies to do the work. Fortunately, in Michigan, we're ahead of the game. During the last administration, a czar, it's not her exact title, but a czar was put in place to oversee all of that water contamination issue and to acquire the funding both from the state level, and the state has put some significant dollars into it. And Debbie and I and Dan and others are pushing the feds to up their responsibility with dollars that would go toward environmental cleanups with PFAS, PFAS, and any other thing that comes up. These are contaminants that we are now able to quantify and find, and we found them in numerous places, well, not numerous, but thus far in a number of places across the 7th District, in the Huron River, here in Ann Arbor area as well. And we're working to clean it up and make sure that we don't let it continue, and also check on other things that might be contaminating as well.
This is from Susan, Lima Township. Last year, my federal withholding tax dropped $2.86 from my paycheck. Yet instead of receiving a tax refund, I now have to pay the IRS hundreds of dollars. The math doesn't add up. The GOP tax cut has not worked for me.
Well, I'm sorry it hasn't worked for you. I can't really comment on the specifics because I don't know the specifics. But if you'd like to contact my office, where we have time.
What question would you like to ask me?
Not today. You've given your statement, and we've talked about it before, but you have a unique situation, and we have people in my office that can walk you through your tax policy, your tax reform,
I've had it
and find the answer.
with me last
Well,
year.
let me say, the majority of people across the state, because of the tax cuts, have experienced just the opposite of what you've experienced. And
Listen here.
the most recent report came out, in fact, from a nonpartisan group, saying that the average was a 33% reduction of individuals.
Oh, definitely not. Yeah.
Okay, let's move on to the next one.
This is supposed to be a discussion. It's a coffee hour.
This is a coffee hour town hall.
I'm giving
She
you
merely asked for a
information.
hand vote. I mean, really. You
Okay,
can't-
let's move on to next.
This question is from Phyllis Dexter. It's an observation, but we'll ask for your comment. Our local tax dollars are being spent to redesign our public school buildings, entryways in order to route visitors through the main offices for security reasons. How is this any different than tightening our national borders for increased security?
Good deduction. I don't think that there's any difference to it. And federal tax dollars were sent to states and local communities to be used in doing whatever is necessary to secure our schools so their kids can go to school safe and come home safe. And the same thing is true with our national borders. Same thing is true when past presidents spent money on building walls along our national borders as well.
This is from Kathy, the Ann Arbor mailing address. Your fellow Republican House member Liz Cheney has criticized the president's plan to force U.S. allies to pay billions of dollars more for hosting American troops on their soil. Have you ever publicly disagreed with any of this president's policies? If yes, please elaborate. If no, are you really in total agreement with every presidential policy or just willing to stay silent?
Well, I can't speak for Liz Cheney, why she disagreed, though she supports the president overwhelmingly as well. I've disagreed and have made statements in public town halls like this about some of his personality statements, some of his tweets. I can't go back and give specific tweets. There's been plenty of tweets that have taken place.
That was my question. I'm not asking about the tweets. I'm asking about the policy.
Well, the tweets are the policy in many cases as well. And so we've taken positions against those. When we talked about closing the border to Muslims, that's a policy. I can remember taking a stance against that. And I think my rating is somewhere up of above 95% in support of the president's policies. Why wouldn't they be? They're conservative policies. They're economic conservative policies. And, oh, by the way, they're working. And America is stronger now than it's been in quite a few years, economically, militarily as well. And I think I'd also state we haven't seen missiles flying from North Korea over Guam for quite some time right now.
This question is from Susan with the Sile Township. Thank you for your past support of the Global Partnership for Education. Will you please support a level of not sure whether it's
125 million.
Thank you. Within the basic education budget for fiscal year 2020. You can sign on to the Dear Colleague letter being circulated by Congressman Fitzpatrick of Pennsylvania to do so, but the letter closes next week, March 17th.
Our policy has been, and it's traditional policy, of not signing on the letters that affect specific committees that I serve on. And because we'll be dealing with that in the committee itself.
This is foreign aid appropriation.
Well, it's education, so we have oversight over that as well. In Congress, unlike the House and Senate in the state legislature, you have jurisdictional areas and multiple jurisdictional areas. So if it deals with any type of education, it will come to our jurisdiction as well.
Even foreign aid?
But even in foreign aid. But bottom line, I'll wait to see what the figures actually are and how they line up with what ability we have to fund any given, let alone the Global Education Fund. I've supported in the past. We'll see how it fits. The president introduced his budget today, or it will be introduced today. And again, as we've said before, the president proposes, the Congress disposes. Generally, the president's budget isn't the budget. I think we can say in modern history it never has been the budget that actually goes out. And so we'll see what happens.
I'm going to try to read several of these portions together because they're sort of on the same topic. Jeb from Britain. Well, I'll read this separately. In light of your recent award as Michigan's most effective legislator, how do you plan on continuing to work in a bipartisan manner for our district?
The same way as before. It's not going to change. I'm in the minority. So I'm going to have to find different mechanisms. But the relationships I've developed already, not only with Debbie Dinkle, but now with Alyssa Slotkin, who's a new member representing the 8th District in Michigan. We've spent time together. I attended her ceremonial swearing in Lansing. Surprised a room full of about 500 people when my wife and I walked in. But we are colleagues now and work together. In fact, right now we're planning a town hall together. So we'll continue to work that way. I don't have a chairmanship this term. I'm a ranking member on the same subcommittee. And so we have to function a bit differently. But the basic personal relations that we have and the philosophy that I have hasn't changed. And so I think we'll work together probably about the same way.
This is one I thought was related to the general topic of communicating with your constituents. This is from Rachel in Dexter. I would like to attend one of your tele-town halls. However, I, like many people these days, do not have a landline. How can I participate?
That's a challenge, and there's a creative tension there. A lot of people have their mobile phones now, and they had hoped that by having only mobile phones, they wouldn't have robocalls that got to their mobile phone. I've received plenty of junk calls to my mobile phone, and I don't know how they got it, but they are gradually getting it more and more. So the organization that we use, we pay to set up the robocall setting for a tele-town hall, where the call is made announcing that a tele-town hall is going on. How they get their lists, I don't know. I know they get some cell phones. My wife gets a call on her cell phone. I know some others that get calls on the cell phones, I've heard at least. You get one. So you probably get a lot of junk calls on your cell phone too.
Could you post that on your website?
The do not call list just doesn't seem to work anymore.
Could you post that on your website?
Post what?
That you're having a whatever it's called, tele-town hall?
It's done in a local community. For instance, we'll do, I think the last one we did was Monroe, Washtenaw, and Eaton counties. And those portions of those counties are called by the list server that makes those calls. What phone numbers are on that list, I have no control over. I'd assume that.
You're not answering any of the questions, sir.
Thank you. Let's go on to the next question then. We'll try that one.
My question, and
All I'm saying is you're gonna have to talk to the companies that do that research. We don't do that.
Can we talk after this meeting?
Talk with my office. Talk with my office. They'd be glad to give you the name of that organization that does it. And if you want to call them and find out how to get on it, I would assume that your cell phone is called by plenty of other people, and maybe over time they'll find that.
You didn't answer her question either about
Thank you.
posting on your website.
If you'd like to make an application to my staff, you're welcome to do that.
No, make
Let's
a
go
comment
on.
right now. You could respond.
All right, this next question
Good to
is,
see you. We missed you.
I'm sure you do.
this next question is from Bill with a Chelsea address. The Guardian reports that Trump has made 7,645 false statements since becoming president. That was in January of 2019. How can you, as a fundamentalist Christian, support a proven liar?
I've supported a number of presidents. I've worked with a president that I didn't support on his political philosophy. I've worked with members of Congress who may not have always told the truth, or their statement was taken out of context and made to be a lie when it really wasn't. Right now, I don't have a choice of what president I work with. I represent the 7th District for the best effect that the 7th District can have as a result of my representation and what goes on with the policy in Washington. I could not have worked if you would have made the same thing, same question, if Hillary Clinton had won the presidency. The same thing could have been true for her. The exact same thing, at least assertions about lying and deceit. That lady was a liar and a deceiver. And it's been proven. It's been proven regardless of what the right-wing media says. No, she's not. But if that would have been the requirement, I couldn't have worked with her either. Now, I don't know whether the president's lies that are alleged to be lies are lies in every case. They are in your mind. They aren't in the mind of some others. So this is the uniqueness of America. We have sides that we take, and that is what America's supposed to be. America's system of government is not a homogeneous unit. That's how it's supposed to be. But right now, I serve a president whose policy is correct. And it's shown to be correct in our economy, the strong growth, the jobs numbers that are going on, the security that we have, the funding for our military that's second to none in the world. And we have the opportunity now of having a country that's moving forward for the first time in quite some time. And I want to keep that going. And so while the American public elected this president, I will work with this president in any way possible. I would work with this president on spirituality has stood for life unquestioningly, pro-life, has stood for religious freedom more than any president in the past 10 years, and regardless of his own position, he's even stood for Muslim religious freedoms. So I think I've answered the question. You don't agree with me on it, but that's okay. There are plenty here that do agree with me on it, so that's America. Let's move on.
He's actually met with the most Christian people around the world. It's on world news, so with the most Christian leaders.
Let's move on.
All right, the next question is from Mark of Dexter. And he lists some concerns that he has and asks for your response and if you have any action to take. I'm concerned about a radical socialist left agenda, lowering the voting age to 16, abortion, infanticide, the Green Deal, national legalization of marijuana, allowing illegals to vote. What is your take on this and any action plan you have?
I agree. What more can I say? I agree. Let me just rehearse what's taken place in the last 6.5 weeks or 2.5 months. In the U.S. House, We've embraced socialism. Green New Deal being one of those. Medicare for all being a second illustration of that. Which, if you're a senior and you're on Medicare like me, ought to strike fear in your hearts, because Medicare has been in deficit since 2010, concerned about taking care of all who are legally on Medicare without adding the entire country to Medicare. We've abided by infanticide. We've violated, well, when you kill a baby outside of the womb, that's infanticide.
That's not happening.
That has happened. Talk to the governor of Virginia. We violated the First Amendment. It was interesting last week when I voted against the so-called election reform bill. The ACLU stood with me on that. Did you hear that? ACLU opposed that legislation because of the violations of First Amendment liberties. Infringed on the Second Amendment without helping one child in school, or a church situation, or a theater situation in that legislation. And we defended illegal immigration.
Who put together?
That was what has taken place over the course of the past 2.5 months since the new majority took control in the House.
Who put together that list?
So that list comes from my own experience. And if you're watching carefully the news, you'll pick that up as well. That comes from actual legislative action.
You mean Fox News?
In the last, no. Thank God we don't only have Fox News. Thank God we don't have only MSNBC either, or CNN. Okay, let's move on.
And maybe you discussed this, but this is from Sue of Dexter. The election reform bill would have ensured fair elections. Why did you vote against it? It would have reduced the role of big money and closed loopholes that allow foreign entities to buy campaign ads.
Well, the ACLU and I stood together on that. It took away First Amendment liberties. It took a nonpartisan FEC, Federal Elections Commission, that's a 3-3 split, and put it to a 5-2 split. That's a concern. That becomes partisan. It took away certain, it expanded the numbers of statements that can be made that could be considered political in a campaign. That's amazing. It gave taxpayer dollars, as long as you didn't give more than $200. It matched what you gave 6-1 from taxpayer dollars.
From corporations who have been fined against improper.
So now you're gonna defend the fact of having more corporation involvement in campaigning? Now that's why I voted against this bill, and a number of other reasons. It's a terrible bill. It took away protections for legal ballots. It said that you could vote, of course, at any time up to the election day, not having a legal affidavit to prove who you were. But you could do it online with a picture. That picture may not have been you. Or you could simply sign an affidavit. That signature may not have been the one you were signing for. You could harvest ballots under this provision, like they did in California, where 7 members won on election night, last election, and within 6 weeks later they lost. Because anyone could come in and bring a ballot or a stack of ballots that they had selected, they'd harvested from friends and neighbors who allegedly had not been able to vote yet.
It worked well in North Carolina, didn't it?
It didn't work well in North Carolina either.
Exactly.
And that's why we don't need it for the rest of the country.
My point is, it won't work.
The bottom line is, it won't work, and that's why I voted against the bill. And that's why I'm glad you and I agree on this one. And so that's why the ACLU opposed it as well,
Don't
so
misquote me, sir.
let's go on to the next one.
This question is from Bill in Chelsea. Have you ever spoken with Representative Will Hurd, a Republican of the 23rd Congressional District of Texas? He represents voters living in a district that includes the longest section of the U.S.-Mexican border. He has stated that there is no emergency and a wall is not necessary.
Yeah.
Why do you think it is?
Because it is, and it is because the people who actually take care of the country, and Will Hurd's district, I know Will, we're good friends. And a good portion of his district doesn't need a wall. He would tell you the portions of his district that do need a wall. And his response to the questions of people saying, do we need a wall on the entire border? No, we don't need a wall on the entire border. We need where it needs to be. And that's all the president is doing by going to Customs and Border Patrol, Homeland Security agents, and leaders and asking them, where is it needed and what do you need? That's where he got the $7 billion price tag. And that's where he got the $8 billion price tag that he's offering now in this new legislation. It's going to take more than that to do the entire border where it's needed. But he's taking in component parts. We can only build so much. And we are building. We have been building. President Obama built. President Bush built walls. And only because the president's name is Trump right now is there any opposition to it. Let's move on.
This is from Judy in Chelsea.
Turn it over the other way. It was upside down. There, okay.
This is from Judy in Chelsea. Given the divisiveness and partisan politics that seem to be increasing in our country, what are you personally doing to address this problem so that Congress actually does the job they were hired to do?
Well, they say in Congress there are workhorses and show horses. My effective rating was based upon being a workhorse. You're not seeing me on a lot of national media. We don't attempt to be on national media. Local media is a different story because I think the people ought to hear me, the people who I represent. But the effective rating came because we did work in a bipartisan fashion. My Democrat colleagues know exactly where I can come down and where I can't. And if they don't know that, they ask me. And then if they find a position where we can come together on, we come together on. That's why Dan Kildee received support from me and the other members, at least the majority of members of our Republican delegation on the Flint water issue. That's why we work together on the Great Lakes Restoration Initiative and are able to fully fund that and continue to do it. And I bet in this budget, the president's budget this year, it will have full funding in it this time. He's heard from us. We work together on it. But there are things we can't work together on. I'm not going to work together on infanticide. I'm not going to work together on a piece of legislation that takes away election security for our country and free elections. I'm not going to work together on that. I'm not going to work together on passing general tax increases. I'm not going to work together when there's opposition to a 5% overall cut across the board of every department. If the massive bureaucratic departments of our federal government can't find 5% somewhere in their budget, somewhere, my wife and I can find 5% in our budget if we have to cut.
You make $175,000 a year. It's a lot easier.
And thank you for the taxpayer funding of my position. That's constitutional. We could find it, and if we can't find it in a $4 trillion budget, then there's something wrong with the federal government. So where we can work together, we work together. And it seems to be working.
This question is from Stephen in Monroe. This past October, you introduced the Preserving Direct Seller Independence Act. Can you explain how that legislation was written and what its purpose was? And why did no other members of Congress in the Direct Sellers Caucus ever co-sponsor it?
Direct Sellers Act, it was in my committee. I sponsored it, co-sponsored it, because it dealt with the issues of concern to direct sales, whether it's Amway or whether it's, Jenny Craig, number of direct sellers that are in this country that people find great benefit from. Reducing unnecessary burdens upon them to carry on the work that they do. And any member of Congress has the opportunity to sponsor any bill that they choose to sponsor. And we don't sponsor every bill that we end up voting on as well. And for that reason, being that I represent Michigan, that has one of the premier direct sponsors in the nation, that being Amway, and other component parts of it, we certainly help those that have legitimate concerns and needs from our frame of reference.
And donate money to your campaign.
Oh, I've never hid that.
I asked, how is that legislation written?
How is it written? What do you mean?
Did the Direct Sellers Association write that and then you just introduced it?
No,
or?
no. It always has to go through bill drafting in the House. It has to meet the correct parts of the bill, language. No, I've never had a bill that was handed to me from whether it's Farm Bureau or whether it was from direct sellers or whether it's from insurance industry for annuities for retirement savings, whether it was from NRA. It comes, ideas come, and then we put the idea together to make the need.
You were the only sponsor of that legislation. There was no other sponsors on it. So you wrote it yourself, or how?
No, we worked with drafters, bill drafters, committee staff, and bill drafters. Let's go to the next question.
This is from Rachel Dexter. We brainstormed a list of ideas for studying gun violence and improving gun safety in this county together. I'm not sure if it says county or country, together after the Parkland shooting in February 2018. What actions have you taken towards the ideas we generated together?
I remember that list on the whiteboard, don't remember every specific point, but we passed a major package for gun safety and opposition to gun violence in this country, which included what I mentioned earlier, the funding that goes to the states and the local communities, local school districts, that can be used for putting in place what's necessary to prevent something like Parkland. Training of individuals as well as operational issues and component parts, letting the freedom come to each school district. Not every school district needs metal detectors, some do. Not every school district needs an officer in the facility, some do. And so that was one of those. Mental health component, we added to that legislation because we found out the majority of individuals that have committed these mass shootings had mental health issues. And so we upped the support for mental health concerns, a number of things that were put in place. The bills that were passed in the House, and happily will not pass the Senate, but were passed in the House just 2 weeks ago, would not have done anything for any of those school shootings, theater shootings, church shootings. Nothing. It wouldn't have prevented any of those people who had those guns from still having those guns.
Just a related question, perhaps, from Sue and Dexter. What is your reasoning for voting no on H.R. 8 when the majority of Americans, including gun owners, believe that stronger background checks are needed for every gun purchase?
None of the background checks in that bill would have stopped any of those shooters.
But they may stop.
The next one.
They would not have stopped. They would have not have stopped those shooters or any others like them to come. We have background checks already. In fact, these background checks made it more difficult. For instance, if one of your neighbors had a restraining order against a partner, fiance, lover, or husband who was committing domestic violence that was ratcheting up to the point that he or she felt that they needed to have a weapon, this legislation would have expanded the waiting time from 3 days on up to potentially 20 days for that person to get a gun to protect themselves. It also would have, if that was my neighbor, and she came to me saying, I am fearful for my life. I'd like you all to turn around and see this gentleman here. These are the signs that he holds up. And that's the type of the reason why we do the town halls like we do. So the low IQ is referring to me.
That's right.
As I try to answer your question. So what it would have done is made it impossible for me to loan my gun to my neighbor, to say until you finish your background check of 3 days presently, which would now be 10 to 20 days, and you have that paper, you have that restraining order, and you believe, humanly speaking, that that piece of paper is not going to stop an attack by this individual who keeps coming and has shown evidence that he or she doesn't care about the restraining order.
What about?
So this says,
What about?
I would be in a criminal, please.
What
Please.
about legislation against
I-
the person
I-
that has the restraining
You
order
took time to call me,
presented
I'll give
against
her my
them?
time to actually get to respond, thank you.
I understand your concern, it just doesn't work that way. I have to have my life threatened in the past, it doesn't work.
It doesn't work that way. So for me to give this gun to my neighbor would put me in a federal offense, potentially sending me to jail for big time, because I wanted to help my neighbor.
So if your neighbor's the perpetrator.
So right now, the neighbor isn't the perpetrator.
It could be.
The neighbor isn't the perpetrator.
You're the one that unstable.
The neighbor is the one who got the restraining order against the perpetrator. That's what this legislation did. It was based upon total error. Even saying that at gun shows, there aren't background checks. Yes, there are. Go to any gun show and try to purchase a gun from a dealer there without having a background check. It can't be done.
You do it online.
And so those are the things that go on online as well.
Yeah.
If you're buying it from gun dealers, they have to do a background check on you as well.
Not if I buy it from him.
If you're buying it illegally, everything HR 8 pretended to do wouldn't affect that, because the illegal gun sale is still going to take place.
Isn't that the same as?
They aren't doing background checks. So, folks, what we need to do is use the law that we have, the laws effectively that we have, in going after the perpetrators of these crimes. And we can do that. But we can't do it with this legislation that is only for one purpose, and that's to remove guns from law-abiding citizens. Next question.
I'm told we're running short on time.
I'd add one other point. Change the Constitution. Do away with the Second Amendment if you want to go to that direction.
How about interpreting correctly?
Yes.
Well-regulated militia, let's pay attention.
All right, next question is,
Well-regulated militia.
the next question is from Emily in Dexter. If the Mueller report comes back indicating that Trump is involved in crimes, will you hold him accountable and possibly vote to impeach?
If it comes back that he's involved in crimes, absolutely. I do not support any elected official that has been proven, not simply indicted, but proven, under a court of law, as any of us deserve, that he's perpetrated crimes. Absolutely. Why wouldn't I? Why wouldn't I? But you know something? Republicans are law-abiding like Democrats as well. I will stand with the law. And I hope the Mueller report comes out soon. Over 2 years, a lot of money spent, and so far, no Russian collusion. No, and that was what it was about.
All right.
No Russian collusion.
How do you know that? You have insight.
I'm told we're out of time. I think I've asked a question from everybody that submitted except one last person. And this is from Karl in Ann Arbor. Representative Walberg concerning the global fund request. We have speaker right to Representative Rogers on the Foreign Operations Subcommittee. He's requesting $1.56 billion appropriation. on the fiscal year budget of 2020. This request aligns with President Trump's goal of eliminating HIV/AIDS as stated in his State of the Union address. The Global Fund has successfully reduced AIDS and malaria around the globe since its inception under President Bush. It's a modest increase with significant payoff.
I'll speak to him. Absolutely. And that's generally how we do it. We don't sign letters on appropriations issues. But I'll speak to him. Thank you for being here. We look forward to being back in the vicinity numerous times over the course of the next 2 years minus 2.5 months. I always try to end this way, that we're Americans, aren't we?
Thank you for posting a little bit in advance this time, so we actually knew we were having the meeting.
We're Americans. We have our disagreements, very clearly, but it's still the greatest nation on the earth. God has blessed us. And key principles were put in place in the inception of this country. I'd encourage each of you to go look up the Federalist Papers. Read the Federalist Papers. Unless you're not an American or don't care about America, you'll be amazed. You will be amazed at the wisdom of these founders. That they debated everything we're debating today, including health care, including the federal banking system, including military engagement, foreign affairs, all of that. They deliberated and they came up with the genius of our Constitution for reasons that have effectively kept this nation going and growing, unlike any other place on the earth. We also had a set of values that were set into the universe by the creator of the universe. That when we walk away from that, and in this country, you don't have to believe in the creator of the universe. That's the beauty of this country. But the founders did. And that's why they designed this government the way it works. And it's worked pretty well. Let's not screw it up. Let's debate it. Let's consider. But let's be very, very careful about walking very far away from what that amazing Constitution with its first 10 amendments to the Bill of Rights implemented for us. Regardless of our belief, lack of belief, our position, our political party, where we live in the country. It was designed in a way that would benefit this country the best. And I think it has. And I don't get my way in every case. I'm serving in the minority now. I did that in my first term. Didn't like it then, I don't like it now. But that's America. And I'm going to work my best to still be the most effective member of the Michigan delegation, the most effective member, if at all possible, of the entire Republican delegation, to impact this country for its best. So, again, thanks for being here, and hope to see you again.